excited because I feel like right now there is a renewed interest in what is actually healthy. What are we supposed to be eating? What are the best foods for us? And I have realized I want to dial back and take some time here on this channel to dive into some of the basics when it comes to that, because I feel like I've talked about the basics and they're just super well known, but what I have come to realize in the last, I don't know, maybe 6 months, after having conversations with people here locally and some people online, is that my assumption is based off my, I don't know, 15, 20 years of really being on my health and wellness journey and doing tons and tons and tons of research, and that it's still not common information and that we still need to be sharing this. So I'm excited because I'm going to dive in here on this channel. It's not going to be every video, but we are going to work our way systematically through the 11 dietary principles from the Weston A Price Foundation. And I'm going to share a little bit about what they are. I'm also going to share which ones we really adopt wholeheartedly, if there's any that I disagree with at all, or just we choose not to implement, and why that is and what that looks like. I am a Weston A Price Foundation chapter leader, there we go, here in Casper, Wyoming, and this is something that we're doing at our local gatherings recently as we've been working through the 11 dietary principles. And as we started doing that, I was like, I feel like this is information that more people need to hear. And so I want to share it out here. Of course, this is not an official Weston A Price channel. And so for that, go to the Weston A Price Foundation channel. There is one of those here on YouTube. These opinions are my own. They don't necessarily represent the foundation, but I am a chapter leader, and with that, I'm very passionate about a lot of the information here, because as you've likely heard me say, if you've been around here for any amount of time, is that I empower families to wellness authentically through biblically rooted principles. The Weston A Price Foundation is focused on wise traditions and on the traditional eating habits of cultures for, going back in history. Not just, hey, what are we being told by science to eat right now? But a lot of them are science-backed as well. And my passion is, if the Lord created it and He said it is good, then we should be eating that. So it does not align 100% with there's so many different things of what people think of when they think biblical eating. I wouldn't say that I teach that. I teach eat real foods, that what God has created. There is a school of thought that it's, all of the Jewish law, and that those principles that are in there are what we should be following. I don't necessarily believe that scripturally, so that's not what I share on here, but I understand where that's coming from. I did kind of stand by that for a while. And then the other one is, you'll hear people say we should only be eating vegetables because that was what God gave Adam and Eve to eat. It's like, yes, that's before the fall. That was before the fall, and things did change after the fall. So life is required for life. And we'll dive into that a little bit in, I believe, the second principle. But let's dive on in without any further introductory ado. Principle number 1, and I am going to keep my little handy book here. If you are interested in grabbing a copy of this for yourself, it's the 11 Dietary Principles book from the Weston A Price Foundation, and you can find that at westonaprice.org, and they're available for purchase. Check with your local chapter leader because they may be able to get them for you as well. And if you don't know who your local chapter leader is, or if you have a chapter local to you, go to, again, that westonaprice.org website, and there is on the little hamburger menu, the little 3 lines that you see in a row, click that drop down, and you will find something that says find local, I believe it says find local chapters and food, something like that. Click that and it's in there. If you happen upon a Weston A Price quarterly journal, you can always flip to the back of that, and all of the local chapters are listed in there as well. Okay, so principle number 1 is to avoid refined and denatured foods. Now in this, it also gives a little description, and I'm not gonna read the whole section, but I am going to read to you the short kind of quote unquote caption, if you will, underneath, and that is: the diets of healthy, non-industrialized peoples contain no refined or denatured foods or ingredients, such as refined sugar or high fructose corn syrup, white flour, canned foods, pasteurized, homogenized, skim or low-fat milk, refined or hydrogenated vegetable oils, protein powders, synthetic vitamins, or toxic additives and artificial colorings. So this one is so foundational for me, I believe, because it's really going back to avoiding things that are more food-like products than they are foods. So if you can't process it in your own kitchen to become like the food that you are purchasing, I would argue, and I believe the foundation would argue together, then that's not something that we should be consuming. Because if it takes highly industrialized processes to create this food, quote unquote, that we are purchasing, that has, maybe 47 ingredients and like something like high fructose corn syrup, which now isn't even always labeled as high fructose corn syrup, you can't make that at home. It is literally impossible to make it at home because the amount of equipment that's required to do it. You have to have industrialized equipment to do it. Therefore, we're not meant to be consuming it. Our bodies don't know what to do with something that has been so crazily processed. So you may hear the term even like ultra processed foods. That's something, so say you have something like cabbage, okay? If you take a cabbage and you slice that cabbage and you add salt to it and you let that create its own brine, and then you put it in a jar and you compact that down and you let it ferment for several days or weeks, is my preference, but creating a sauerkraut. Now you have technically processed that food. So to say like no processed food, that's not what the principle is. It's no refined or denatured food, because what that processing of the cabbage does in the fermentation is it actually makes nutrients more bioavailable. It creates probiotics. It actually improves that food even better to make it more easily digestible for the body. Whereas if you were to take, like high fructose corn syrup, for example, you were to take corn, and it's not even corn that's meant to be consumed, that's grown, genetically modified completely, and then created this other thing, that breaks that food down. If you were to take a protein powder, this one's going to be highly controversial. There are better protein powders out there for sure if you do have to consume protein powder for whatever reason. But the principle is to avoid those whenever possible. That instead of relying on things like protein powders that have to be broken down and then they're isolated from their whole food, where you have all of the constituents and all of the vitamins and minerals working together, then instead when you isolate pieces out, that's when you start to get more allergic reactions. That's when you start to get more things that the body doesn't recognize, or you have a harder time digesting things, or it's causing inflammation. And it's because it's not in the form that it was created to be consumed in. So that's one of the principles that we really do try to follow. And one of the things that recently, and diving back in actually since becoming a chapter leader and really going back to the roots, because I had read all of these a long time ago, and really getting back into them, I was like, I have relied a little bit too much on some protein powders and things like that. So the supplements that we take are real food-based supplements. The foods that we're consuming on a regular basis, we're avoiding those vegetable oils, seed oils, because again, most of those seed oils, now if you are pressing your own sunflower seed at home, if you have a what is it even called, the oil press, I believe it is, like a manual oil press, which you can purchase, and you can grow your own sunflowers organically, and you can press those seeds. I would argue that in moderation, that is actually a health food. However, when you're purchasing something made with sunflower oil in the store, it's had hexane processing to pull it out. It is so denatured. It is heated so many times, and when you heat it, it's really unstable because of the way that the chemical bonds are, and it oxygenates, and it causes all sorts of issues in the body. Or sorry, not oxygenates, oxidizes. And so that's not a food anymore, right? So really taking a look at the things that you're bringing into your home. Are these foods that are in the state that they're supposed to be, or are they overly refined and denatured? Now, that said, we are not, we follow this principle, I would say 99% of the way, probably, because it does say canned foods. Like if you're home canning it, it's different than when you're buying it at the store. Now, I understand that does lower the nutrition level a little bit. Something like freeze drying is a better preservation method as far as the nutrient content goes. But if you are canning that in your own glass jar at home from produce that you grew, I don't see the problem with it, honestly. However, relying on those things in the store that have been just lower nutrient quality, it's replacing the caloric intake. So your body, you can only consume so much a day, right? So when you're consuming foods that are these refined and denatured foods, things like white flour and the seed oils and things, it's displacing the ability for your body to really be consuming more nutrient dense foods that will fuel the body, that will make you feel that, fuel healing, fuel the function, and all of those things. So that's why I'm really passionate about that. We do use a little bit of all-purpose flour in our sourdough when we're making that, and by we, I mean me. I'm the one who's making the sourdough. I use a little bit, but I am using fresh ground grains, fresh milled grains in there as well, ancient grains, spelt and einkorn, for about 70% of it. So there's only a small amount within our sourdough loaf, and I am sour leavening it so that it changes that glycemic index. It's not going to spike your blood sugar or anything like that the way that it would if it wasn't sour leavened or processed properly. So keeping those things in mind, like, are you consuming your white flour as a huge amount of your diet? Are you, consuming these foods? And look at those, they add up a lot, right? So trying to opt for the better options that aren't as stripped. And so if you are going to use, like I said, we use the all-purpose flour, but it is unbleached, it's unbrominated, which your standard all-purpose is not. So you want to look at those things, because your standard all-purpose on the store shelf is bleached and it's had bromine added to it, and that just makes it even more inflammatory and worse. So that's dietary principle number 1, and where I will leave that for today. I would love if on this series in particular, you guys would comment down below and let me know, is this something that you're following? Do you have questions about it that you would like clarification on? And if you are already following these dietary principles, what have you found? Do you have challenges with it? Do you have pointers that have been really helpful for you in implementing these things as you have transitioned out of maybe a more standard diet, and by standard, like standard American diet is what we would say, or the standard Western diet, because it's not just America. And what kind of benefits have you seen as you have been doing that? Because we have noticed big benefits in our energy, especially cutting those seed oils out, which we didn't realize how much they were hiding. We haven't done ultra processed foods for a long time, but even in some of our minimally processed foods that we were buying, they were really hiding in there. So eliminating those has been huge for our energy, brain fog, for me, my skin, inflammation level. Those have all been really, really helpful. So that's what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for taking time to join me. Until next time, take care, friends. Cheers.